This is a Geek History of Time,
where we connect nerdery to the real world. I'm Ed Blaylock. I'm a dad in my 40s. I'm a 7th grade world history teacher. I have a Bachelor of Arts in History from the University of California at Davis, go Ags, focused primarily on Western Europe and East Asia.
I'm Damian Harmony. I am also a father in my 40s. I am raising my children to be nerdy and geeky and decent and all various and sundry that go with that. I'm a Latin teacher. I have a master's degree in history, a bachelor's degree in history, both of which focused on women's history, specifically in England. Now I'm focused on ancient Rome. I have been teaching for many, many years and geeking for even longer. The very first game I ever played that is really of any note is the TSR Marvel role-playing game.
And yeah, we've talked about what a pile of crap that was.
It's beautiful. All percentals, baby.
Yeah, oh, Lord. And my experience dates back to age of 9 when I first got introduced to Dungeons & Dragons, thanks to a school enrichment program on weekends, oddly enough. Nice. In the 80s, which is kind of weird.
Well, we had money for schools back then.
Well, yeah. I was thinking more about the Satanic Panic. But currently, I'm playing in a 5th edition D&D game with Damian, and I'm really excited, as I've mentioned before, about the upcoming release of a new edition of BattleTech.
Yes, I'm also currently playing in a game with Ed, where we're finding the tail-end uses of druids and all various and sundry with that. I'm also running a game for my children, my daughter, who is an arcane trickster halfling, and my son, who is a human barbarian aspect of the bear. I'm looking very much forward to my little brother, Bowie, starting a game of Scion for us via Skype, because Scion was amazing.
Yeah, I got to figure out how to make the time to get in on that, because holy cow.
Oh my goodness. Hey, I'm currently reading, actually I'm just about to finish, Eaton Thomas, or Etan Thomas, the Latinist in me, screws up all the pronunciations. Mr. Thomas's book called We Matter. It's about activism amongst black athletes, and in this current age of striving for social justice and what athletes can do to play their part in that. And it's really quite compelling, if not heartbreaking at the same time. Another book that I plan to read afterwards is Punching Nazis and Other Good Ideas by Keith Lowell Jensen, a local comedian and a local performer, as well as a local author now.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic book.
All right. Right now, I'm working my way through At Home by Bill Bryson, a history of modern domesticity and the things that we take for granted in our homes on a day-to-day basis. It's a way more interesting than it sounds, I promise you. Bryson is a really good writer. He's really funny. And he's very good at putting things in kind of common sense language, ordinary language, and making them entertaining. The other, after that, I'm going to pick up and really try to finish Honor in the Dust, a book about the American occupation of the Philippines in the wake of the Spanish-American War. I don't, off the top of my head, remember the author's name. Wish I did, but it's a very compelling history, especially in light of the global war on terror.
Oh, it's fantastic.
So,
yeah, that's so what we do here at Geek History of Time is we take a look at some sort of historical context in which we plug various geeky things. Or in other words, we look at something that tickled us as nerds and then combine it with things that tickled us as historians.
Yeah. Or like talking about what we're going to be talking about today, something that we've dealt with as nerds that interests us a great deal. As historians, I don't think the CCA is anything that particularly tickles either one of us. But
that's a good point.
I'm picking nits there.
Yeah.
So.
Well, nits need to be picked. Yeah, without any further ado, let's get into the episode about the Comic Book Code Authority. Ed, you like comic books?
Yes. You know the answer to that. That was totally a setup question.
Oh, boy, howdy.
But,
do you like comic books that are censored by their own publishers?
I'm sure that a lot of the comics that I love and enjoy have been censored by their own publishers, yes.
Boy, howdy, yeah. Today's topic is going to be about the Comic Book Code, also known as the CCA, Comic Book Code Authority. I've also titled this, Or Why My Dad Hates Adlai Stevenson.
I'm really looking forward to that story.
Oh,
you kind of bounced that off of me when we were talking about developing this. I really want to hear the details.
Oh,
there.
it's in there.
Okay.
It is not worth the journey. The journey will be far more worth it than the actual payoff. But what do you know about Comic Book Code Authority?
Well, it's a body that has shrunk dramatically in recent years. Right now, I think Archie Comics, Bongo Comics, and I don't remember who the third one is. I want to say DC, but that's only because my hatred for DC is so strong that I'm willing to believe they'd do anything.
They quit the day after Marvel quit.
Well, of course they quit the day after Marvel.
Right, but they quit.
I mean, come on.
And I want to say Archie quit too.
Oh,
yeah,
all right,
yeah.
Okay, yeah. The source in my research was
I might be wrong.
Out of date.
I might be wrong.
Well, Wikipedia. So I don't know. Could be meat, could be cake, to quote George Carlin. I know that it's shrunk a lot in recent years, and I know that it was done. It was put together by all of the major comic book publishers at the time as a way to avoid government interference in their business practices.
Yeah, it's kind of like you stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. Like,
that's a great analogy.
Which my moral stance has always been, no, you go ahead and give me something to cry about then, because I want to look you in the eye when you do this. Knowing full well that I fight losing battles all the time, so I don't mind. So
I could do this all day.
Exactly.
That's why we get along.
That's one of the many reasons. Yeah. So prior to the comic book code, actually, comic books were diverse and they had something a little bit for everyone.
Yeah.
They actually, it depends on how far you want to go back. I say go back to hieroglyphics. Those were comic books.
In a way, I can see that. Actually, that makes sense. Tomb paintings,
right? And and it's telling stories of people.
Go.
Yeah, it's it's Rin Tin Tin chasing Trajan's column. I
like it.
And they were also painted back then. I don't know if people know this, but like Roman frescoes and stuff like that were not just these white marble things. They were actually painted
brilliantly, in colors that make your eyes bleed to a modern day aesthetic,
like Tokyo without the neon. Really, just gaudy colors.
Holy cow! Yeah.
There's even talk of Roman statues appearing to breathe. That's how good their paint was.
Oh yeah.
But once it's been left out in the sun for 2,000 years,
plus
it bleaches. I had a shirt that did that once over a summer. I found it later on. I was like, I guess I'm wearing pink now.
Yeah.
But
had the same thing happen with the sweatshirt.
If you want to go forward into the 1840s, you could probably kind of cite the first comic book that you see. It's in the 1840s. Someone in America compiled the adventures of Obadiah Oldbuck into a book.
Okay.
And Obadiah Oldbuck was a translation from a French comic book that was created in 1837 called, and this is all in French, and I speak Latin, so I pronounce all my letters, Les Amours de Monsieur Vieux Bois, which is...
Vieux Bois.
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
That's Les Amours de Monsieur Vieux Bois.
Okay, if anybody's listening who can explain what the word heathen is in French, I'd appreciate it so I can throw that at him next time.
I gotta say, I've read this, and this is to comics what early title cards were to dialogue in silent films. It was colorless. Okay. It was dull. It was very, very linear. Mm-hmm. There were no real punchlines. There was no real drama. Mm-hmm. For instance, Obadiah Oldbuck, which I love that was the name that they came up with from the French one. But Mr. Oldbuck, he loves a woman. He pines after her, and he receives a negative response. That's it.
Okay.
And then
really?
This, and then I quote directly: Mr. Oldbuck, in despair, commits suicide. Fortunately, the sword passes below his arm. For 840 hours, he believes himself dead. He returns to life, dying of hunger. Ha 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 ha.
That's wow, really?
Yeah, it was. See, he didn't die, so he went on to starve. That's the joke. After 5 pages.
Sweet Christ.
Right.
Yeah,
that's hilarious.
Yeah. You know what I find interesting about that is just talking about the quality of that particular story,
which might have been compelling back then.
I
don't know.
Well, here's the deal. I've read and listened to enough interpreters, present storytelling of folk tales from back before that time period, and I got to tell you, they're a hell of a lot better than that. I don't know what.
Yeah.
So I think the thing that primarily made that novel was the fact that it had printed pictures, and it was something you could buy in a dead tree form, was distributable, and you didn't have to rely on bugging Grandpa to tell you the story again. You could just pick it up and read it. I think.
You also had to be literate, and basically literate might have been what they were aiming at. Kind of like if you look at presidential speeches through the years, different presidents speak at different levels. And you can see their appeal with a certain demographic of voters.
I want everybody to note that I am not jumping in with a comment at this time about our current administration.
And neither have I.
Yeah,
I was thinking of Andrew Jackson, actually.
With
his unique spellings of I are smart.
Yeah, well,
I are from a log cabin. And he was he was a very salty individual, but he was also very rich. So it's not like he couldn't afford tutors.
Yeah.
But he was a mean fellow. Speaking of which, it's
affectation.
Actually right. Yeah, it's a good point. It's right at this time actually that the Obadiah Stone stuff comes out. It's right around the Jacksonian era.
Okay.
So after this, it's a series of him trying to kill himself for like many panels. Really good shit for kids in the 1830s and 1840s to read.
Yeah.
Or anyone.
Clearly, I guess.
Yeah. Give you an idea as to what's going on. In 1830s France, Louis Philippe I is king.
Okay.
And he survives assassination attempt after assassination attempt after assassination attempt. He survives uprisings, revolts in various cities, and he institutes a series of clampdowns on political expression. So it could be that this was one of the only outlets for people that was still acceptable. So you get kind of a blanding of what might have
otherwise been a more entertaining story.
Also,
keeping in mind the idea that the overarching theme here is censorship. That makes sense,
right?
So just as a question,
sure,
kind of a tangent, but Louis Philippe, I forget. Do you know, was he a Bonaparte or was he one of the Bonapartist Restoration? No, 1820s,
1830s.
1830s. No, okay, never mind. He's a Bourbon. Forget it.
Yeah.
Forget it. Moving on.
In 1839, the daguerreotype was invented.
Okay.
The first reliable camera.
Yep.
This is all leading up to 1848. So again, I just want to go back to the date. 1837, it's in French. 1840, it's in English.
Okay.
In 1848, which is a really fun year if you're down for revolutions. It's oh man, you throw a dart and you'll hit a revolution. My point is, I guess, is that you've got a comic book about a bumbler trying to find love and also trying to kill himself. Kind of strangely fits into this period between the 1815 clampdown on all things democratic and the 1848 explosion of all things democratic. And right in between, you have this really bland, almost like this is part of the kindling that leads to. Yeah. And I don't think it was necessarily, hey, they didn't give us our Monsieur Dubois or whatever his name was, but when you see art being this bland and suffering like this, usually a revolution's right around the corner. That
makes perfect sense. I can see that connection. I find it. Yeah, no, I think the connection that you're drawing there. I see where you're going with it, and I see what you think of that. I think my own take on it is more in the direction of looking at it as what the causative relationships are.
Sure.
That the two are being created essentially by the same source.
Yeah, same society.
That Philippe and the Bourbons and everybody involved in that particular hierarchy was desperate to maintain the social order for the sake of their own safety.
Oh, absolutely.
And so anything that could potentially be subversive, anything that could potentially be in any way involved in lèse-majesté,
right,
would be viciously tramped on. And so
similar to modern art in the 1950s is why we ended up getting abstract expressionism.
Yes.
Yeah. Jackson Pollock can thank censorship for that,
Yes.
really. So it comes to America in 1840. In America in the 1840s, some fun stuff happening. It's just ahead of the gold discovery out west.
Yeah.
So therefore, it's just ahead of the Irish. It's also just ahead of the Mexican-American War.
Yes.
It's just ahead of a huge influx of Chinese immigrants.
Yes.
There's a lot of things that are about to pop, and you have this bland little comic book that just kind of, a holdover from the era of Good Feelings, I guess, where you follow a bumbler trying to kill himself. If you want to skip ahead a little, we get to the 1930s. Fun time worldwide. 1933 in America, you get a book called The Famous Funnies. Now, by this point, you had comics in the newspapers, for which I believe yellow journalism was named.
It was the yellow rag paper that got used by Hearst and his ilk because it was the cheapest stock they could get a hold of.
Without going to hemp.
Which actually wouldn't have been that big a deal back then. But
No.
anyway, it's a topic for another time.
Sure.
The funnies became an integral part of everybody's reading experience. And, part of this is going to tie in, I swear, but part of what I find interesting about this whole arc is when we're talking about the newspaper funnies. Here in the United States, that was what everybody assumed any kind of graphic art was going to be. I mean, for forever.
Yeah, it sets the tone.
It's at the tone. Everything was, essentially a 4-panel, or back in the old days when they had more space to run the funnies. It was 8 or 9 sequential, but it was strictly sequential art, and it was punchline comics. It was
everything was contained.
Everything was contained. Everything took up space. A specific amount of space in the newspaper. And what's interesting is all of the developments that we kind of have, all the expectations that we carry into the 50s and the CCA, I think kind of come from this cultural association that we have with comics and visual art is in the kids' ghetto. It's this children's medium. Everybody reads them, but it's the part of the newspaper you hand off to your kids, and it's relatively safe and relatively harmless. Never mind the amount of slapstick violence involved. But socially it's acceptable. Yeah, it's sanitized.
Absolutely.
Whereas, and this is where I want to wind the clock back a ways. The history of sequential art and what we would call comics, anything something like comics, in Asia, and particularly in Japan, is very different. And from the very outset, sequential art that was being created there was being distributed to a very wide audience.
So it wasn't made for kids.
It was not made for children. Oh. And so the cultural assumptions that they had in Japan, that they still have in Japan, toward comic book art as a medium, it's a completely different kind of outlook on it.
So that leads to less panic about, oh my God, what about the children?
Yes, it leads to less panic about what about the children. It leads to a culture in which, or a medium that is very expressly delineated in this is a comic book magazine, weekly comic book, Shonen Jump is a weekly, monthly, I'm not that up on,
it's
the publishing, but it's serialized, that is, a collection of graphic art stories that is specifically targeted to schoolboys.
Oh, interesting.
And then there are other publications that are specifically targeted with stories for, men in their late teens, early 20s.
Sure.
Romance comics.
So that when somebody comes in complaining, saying, "Oh, well, what about the children?" The response is, "What are you, stupid? That's not for the kids."
It'd be like somebody saying, well, what are you publishing this smut for? My 4-year-old got a hold of it, and them going, "Dude, that's a copy of Playboy."
Right. Why did you
hand that to your kid?
Right. Why did you leave it where they could read it?
Yeah, lock it up in your armoire at the back where you're supposed to, guys have done since the 50s. That's what
Taking
you're supposed to do.
On this?
Yeah. Oh, I've already got it. Yeah,
I just use a separate browser.
Yeah.
So, if I could pull us back to the 1930s, because they were so much fun.
Yeah.
So you have the famous funnies, which is essentially they took comics from the newspapers and put them all in one book, and I think it sold for about 10 cents in 1933. These were in color, which is a first. They're still not very funny. And they're more of a collection of the funny pages. It's almost like a treasury than it is any kind of monographic comic book like what we would see today. Yeah. It's very cheap. It's very diversionary. And it's smack dab in the middle of the Great Depression. So there is a need for keeping kids busy because you're traveling, because you're in the jalopy or what have you.
How did you find out about my grandmother's life?
Well, you're in California. So
good point, yeah.
Also in the 1933, I just want to give a little bit of an idea as to what else is going on. The Golden Gate Bridge starts construction, which, interestingly, I found out is not a WPA. It was not a Work Projects Administration project, but a lot of roads that led up to it literally were.
Yeah.
And a lot of the infrastructure that went around it really were. Also, in 1933, Pakistan is mentioned for the first time as Muslims in India start working toward having their own country.
Nice.
Hitler takes office in Germany, mostly to make Germany great again. Chancellor...
There we have it, folks.
We made it 15 minutes.
Ding, ding, ding.
But he did make those promises. I have pictures from my trip to Berlin. This is me getting to share that I went to Berlin. Of him doing this. He was chancellor, and he delivers his proclamation to the German nation. And I just want to hit you with a quote of what was coming out in 1933. It begins, "More than 14 years have passed since the unhappy day when the German people, blinded by promises from foes at home and abroad, lost touch with honor and freedom, thereby losing all." Well into his speech, he says that, quote, "Communism, with its method of madness, is making a powerful and insidious attack upon our dismayed and shattered nation." He promises to end the nation's economic distress and attendant personal miseries, and ends with, "May God Almighty give our work His blessings, strengthen our purpose, and endow us with wisdom and the trust of our people, for we are fighting not for ourselves, but for Germany." Then he set the Reichstag on fire. Well, it gets set on fire.
He didn't, literally hold the... Yeah.
Yeah, but it gets set on fire, luckily. Yeah. And then he passes...
What was the name of the special prosecutor they put together to investigate that fire? Oh, wait, no, they didn't have one.
Sorry. Yeah, jeez.
Sorry.
And then he passes the Enabling Acts, or he gets it passed, claiming emergency powers, a la Chancellor Palpatine. Opens up Dachau, and eventually withdraws from the League of Nations. Because we don't need to be with this group of people that are our foes.
Germany first, right?
Right.
Yeah.
He locks up and later releases a portion of over 200,000 people who are considered to be bad for Germany. Mm-hmm. Conservatives cheer him, thinking that they can control him. So that happened in 1933.
Wow. The air suddenly went out of the room.
Also, Lone Ranger started up as a radio play.
Oh, nice.
So there we
go. Yay!
Also, FDR took office. Inaugurated in 1933, starts his fireside chats.
Oh, yeah.
The Dust Bowl and LA flooding begin, which I get a kick out of that because climate change is obviously a hoax, and because how can you have the Dust Bowl in one area and flooding in another? It just doesn't. It has to be uniform.
Obviously,
it has
all
to be like
over
Hoth,
the planet. Yeah,
right?
Yes, yeah. We're either going to wind up as Tatooine or Hoth. Yeah, there's no way you could have different results. The snowball.
Right.
Remember the snowball.
You can hold a snowball.
You can hold a snowball in the capital. It can't be warming. Yeah.
Which is interesting because there's a guy who was, and I forget his name, but he was a huge agricultural expert, and he was talking and giving a speech in front of Congress, and one of his aides came up to him and they said, "We need you to stretch it for another 20 minutes because there's a storm coming through." And it was a sandstorm coming through to Washington from Kansas.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah, no. The
and so he had to stretch it until the dust blacked out Washington, punctuating his speech and actually getting funding for what he wanted to do, which was planting a bunch of trees.
Yeah.
So.
No, the firsthand accounts of that are harrowing.
Oh,
I don't know how much.
There's a book called The Worst Hard Time. It's really good.
Oh. God
really
almighty. Good. People talking about, actually believing, no kidding, this has to be the end of the world.
Yeah.
Because the sandstorms, dust storms were so bad that literally, the sun effectively did not rise for days.
Oh, yeah. I remember reading...
Whole
what was it?
farmsteads being buried under. I mean, just
12 million tons of dirt left Kansas and essentially silted Chicago.
Yeah.
And then a whole bunch of Kansas farmers moved to Chicago, I guess to be with their farms again.
I guess.
But also to get jobs.
To try to get work.
Right. Some sweeping up the dust from their farms.
Yeah.
It was a bizarre thing. Comic books, huh?
Yeah.
That's, good times.
Good topic.
We're still a little ways away from comics, but we are starting to see sprinklings of them with the success of the Famous Funnies, because it was successful. Now, in June of 1938, we get to probably one of the most famous comic books there was. Action Comics puts out Superman's very first appearance.
Yep.
This is Jerry Siegel and Joel Shuster, and they write Superman's story. And it's actually not the whole comic. A lot of people think it's only about 13 pages out of a compilation. And the interesting thing I found there was that it was a throw-in. Like, they had tried to get it across many a time. And people kept saying, this is ridiculous. And finally they're like, well, we need to fill this much space. What do we got? Try the Superman one. But it had been developed over a few years. In my research, I found out that it's entirely possible that Superman was created as a reaction to Jerry Siegel's father's death during a robbery.
Okay.
When he was a kid.
Makes sense.
Basically his father dies, and then he comes up with the idea of a bulletproof superhero. I mean, it does make sense. It didn't even necessarily have to be I'm going to fix my family with this, but just that was what was rolling through his head.
Going through his mind, yeah.
But, Jerry Siegel and Joel Shuster tried to sell the idea from about 1933 onward, which I didn't realize it took 5 years. Yeah. Finally, they sold it for $130 to DC, with DC getting the rights, quote, forever. So they gave him $10 a page.
Jesus.
Which, there's a whole story in how long it took for them to get any kind of credit. For them
and their heirs to get any kind of anything. Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Oh, my God.
But if you look at Superman, and everybody's seen him, he's got his underwear on the outside, he's wearing tights, he's got a cape, he's all the primary colors. Mm-hmm. I mean, he really sets the tone for what we come to know as superhero comics. And superhero comics are they're in and then they're out. They're in and then they're out. But he looks honestly like the powerlifters of the 1920s. Like, if you go back and find the powerlifters from the 20s, they're wearing full body stockings essentially.
Yeah, well, because it'd be indecent not to.
Oh, well, yeah.
Come on.
And unitards were for carnies, and that was an interesting thing too.
All right.
But the cape made him any scenes with him running or jumping more dramatic. He didn't fly at first. He could only jump.
No, he jumped.
Leaped tall buildings in a single bound.
Which ties in with him being super strong. Makes sense.
Yeah. His original story ran for 13 pages, like I said, but in many ways it was the first superhero comic.
Yeah.
So, like I said, is the first superhero comic. And actually, from about 1938 to about 1945, you see superheroes really stepping onto the main stage. That is the thing everybody really digs, is superhero comics. Which kind of makes sense if you think about it, because we need someone to save us from fascism, essentially.
Yeah.
And so Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, all very, very popular. From about 1938 to 1940, mostly, interestingly, because we weren't in the war yet, mostly these heroes took on gangsters.
Yes.
And they took up corrupt officials, bad cops, I want to make that point very clear, and a few robbers. And that's going to be important later as well.
Yeah. Well, just that's a really big element of eventually in a few weeks, hopefully, what I want to talk about the evolution specifically of Batman.
Ooh, yeah.
Because organized crime and the issues that people were seeing in the news and the stuff that people were dealing with every day. When I say seeing in the news, I mean in the newspapers. I know television wasn't widespread. Don't anybody write in complain about that.
In movie reels, though.
Well, yeah, this is true. Yeah. But a lot of the really sensational stuff that was going on in current events at that time was organized crime related. This is the period of time. This is by this time I think we are post prohibition. Mm-hmm. But anybody who was an adult at that point had a memory of.
That's a good point.
What had gone on with Al Capone, Machine Gun Kelly,
sure,
all the horrible violence, all that stuff going on.
And just because you stopped alcohol didn't mean they didn't find other rackets.
Yeah, and they did find other rackets, and so the somebody who had abilities that you didn't have to stand up to these shadowy figures of corruption, these people who had enough money and power to avoid the law, to avoid consequences, was a very important part of, I think, the common power fantasy during that time period, because there was this very clear inequality between people who had access to get consequences for people who hurt them and most everybody else who didn't.
That's a good point.
So just throwing that one out there.
Absolutely. In October 1939, the Human Torch and the Submariner both appear in Marvel Comic number 1. Now, this is not Johnny Storm. This is the android that is called the Human Torch, whose name I forget, but it's not important. He's an android.
And he didn't go anywhere very far after this. Because he got taken over. The identity of the Human Torch got taken over by Johnny Storm.
About 20 plus years, 24 years
24
later.
years later, yeah. Well, the 60s, but he's the one everybody remembers. And and Captain America played him in the movie, so
also,
that's a lot better.
It's a sad moment in history.
Well,
but yeah, you're absolutely right. But so they weren't quite heroes. Neither of them were really quite heroes. Now, I found that interesting too. They were not paragons of virtue. They were, in some ways, agents of chaos themselves, but they put aside their enmity toward humanity and helped the Allies fight the Nazis and the Japanese, which makes a lot of sense if you think Submariner. He's all about the ocean and stuff. That's our fight against the Japanese. It's our fight against Germany. I mean, we've got oceans on both sides. Lucky us. In March of 1941, but it was actually released in December of 1940. But they go by cover date. Yeah, was March 1941, even though it's I've never understood cover dates.
Neither do I.
Joel Simon and Jack Kirby, they make a comic book with a gentleman dressed in star-spangled attire named Captain America. And on the cover, he is punching Hitler. Again,
in the face.
In the face. Again, this is released in December 1940.
Hey, man, get your SJW crap out of my comic books.
Which I love.
Knock that off.
Right. This makes Antifa cool before it was even national policy. And they did this on purpose, by the way, because they knew that Nazis were a bad idea. These guys figured it out in 1940. But that's Captain America. Most superheroes are fighting the Nazis or Japanese. Several of them have a teenage sidekick, which I thought was interesting. It was just kind of the publisher's way of bringing kids in more. Yeah,
it was a way of trying to give younger readers somebody to identify with. Yeah, it's the old marketing ploy that same marketing ploy that decades later gave us the Ewoks.
To get
to get little kids. Yeah, well, yes.
It's a bullish market.
Well, yeah, nice. I like it. No, the psychological foundation underpinning behind it is, a little kid a younger child is going to identify either with the smallest thing in the frame or the biggest thing in the frame.
That's true.
And so, throw something small and childlike or youthful in there, and that'll be like, I can be like Robin, I can be like,
Bucky.
Superboy.
Yeah. No,
I
makes sense.
I think for a variety of reasons, the less said about Bucky, the better. I think the Marvel Cinematic Universe did the right thing with how they did Bucky.
I agree.
And what happened in the mists of time should be re-obscured by the mists of time.
Well, you got to also keep in mind, comic books in the 40s are different than movies in the 2000s.
Well, yeah, no, like, society was very different. Yeah, no, I understand.
They were fighting Nazis.
Yeah,
Most superheroes at the time were fighting Nazis or the Japanese. Was not very kind in terms of racial politics at all. I gotta call that out.
If you can find a picture of a Japanese soldier or especially a Japanese officer in a comic book from the 1940s
who looks like a human,
who looks non-simian,
I will give you money.
Non-simian, and is not wearing big Coke bottle lens glasses.
Yes.
Then yeah, and does not need significant orthodontic treatment.
Yes.
And the thing is, another aside because that's what I'm doing during this particular podcast. But growing up, I had the privilege, the true privilege of being surrounded by a very diverse population of other kids.
Oh, you lived in Reading.
Yeah, nice. No, well, San Diego and Hawaii. Specifically, I grew up. Yeah,
Naval Town.
I grew up surrounded by other Navy kids, and the schools that I went to were full of Navy kids and not Navy kids, and so the stereotypes that we see in these media from the 40s of Asians in particular never made sense to me because that's not what my friends in school looked like. None of their parents looked like that. Why? To this day, as an adult, I actually have to think about, they're all wearing Coke bottle lenses because they're squinting.
Right.
No, they're not. Asshole.
Yeah.
And, and within the context of, the whole nation being mobilized for a war against, a nation state that was made up primarily of, this one ethnic group.
Oh, yeah.
I understand how that happened.
And why it was effective.
And why it was very effective. But,
doesn't make it right.
Still, well, and it doesn't, and it still just doesn't make sense to me. But, yeah. So, anyway, sorry. Aside
that's
there
good.
On that.
This is what we do here.
Yeah, this is true. Good point.
So, the interesting thing is that these comics were made both for children and adults. It helped with morale overseas with our soldiers and our sailors. And it also helped kids to remember why dad was gone, or why mom worked in the factory, or why there were scrap iron drives. It wasn't just to get the nickel.
Or why they were working in the backyard building, maintaining a victory garden.
Yeah, all those things. Yeah. So it was really important. And so the artists and writers, they're answering a market need, ultimately. Both reflecting and helping shape the culture, and they knew what was going on. So they were mirroring what was happening, by the way, in movies. And I really want to make this connection to movies. In the 1940s, certain kinds of comedy died away. Slapstick comedy was kind of always hovering there, but screwball comedy was gone by 1942. It's had its day and it's gone. And I might do an episode about screwball comedy.
I'd be interested in.
But it was really quite something. But what you do see a lot of are war movies, and not just the Why We Fight newsreels by Frank Capra, but like actual war movies where superheroes are movie stars. Yeah. And they're fighting the Japanese and they're fighting the Nazis or they're on the margins of these fights.
Oh yeah, well it's I don't want to say that's the peak of that genre, but it's certainly where that genre really kicked in a high gear.
Yeah.
I'd say probably the peak of the war movie genre is the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, to justify why we still have the military.
Well, to justify why we still do, and also, for the I don't want to say nostalgia value, but for I guess that's the best word I can think of. The war movies in the 40s were explaining why we're doing this, what's going on, and creating entertainment drama out of that.
Right.
And then into the 50s and into the 60s, it then turned into myth making. Because if you look at Audie Murphy and his film career,
right,
as and the biggest thing that made him an actor was the fact that he was the most decorated soldier in U.S. history.
Yeah.
And then the movie Go for Broke, which I don't know if you're familiar with.
I'm not.
Okay, spending several years growing up in Hawaii with a very large Japanese American population. Go for Broke and the 442nd Regimental Combat Team were a very, very big deal. Go for Broke was their battle cry.
Oh, okay.
And that the 442nd was not the only, but it is the best known of the regiments that were formed out of young men who were brought imprisoned. Out of who were imprisoned, and one of the ways they could get out was to join the army and fight. Interestingly, in Europe,
right?
But they actually used Japanese as a code method that the Germans would have a hard time breaking.
Which is interesting because we also sent Native Americans over to the Pacific, also who were kind of imprisoned. The guy who came
less
up with
explicitly, but the
guy who came up with the internment camps idea was a former BIA official.
I had not known that.
Yeah,
but,
and so then we sent them over there, and then, imperialism.
That's what empires have done throughout history. But
it's a really good point.
So look at
the Shirme system.
Yeah, well, and look at how the Scots got sent everywhere in the goddamn world as the bleeding edge
for West Virginia.
Yeah.
It's awful.
Yeah. So
comic
books.
Yeah.
Back to
so the connection between movies and comic books really starts up there, I think, because you have serialized episodes of Captain America, of Batman, of Superman, these little shorts, and it's happening on multimedia. It's a multimedia platform. It might be one of the first that you see, and that really leads into the post-war time. So the war happens. The main focus of the war is fighting fascism. That's what could destroy us, either a Japanese version or a German version. That's what could destroy us. After the war, this thing happened twice, atomic bombs dropping.
Yes. Well, we say after the war, at the very tail end of the war.
That happened.
Okay, yeah.
And then after the war, there was a tremendous anxiety about atomic anything. Yeah. Huge, and the anxiety was post-war. There's another country that's also trying to get that same nuclear capability, and then they end up getting it. And now the fear is that we're all going to be annihilated.
Yes, it's now actually like a meaningful
existential threat.
Yeah, it is literally an existential threat.
Whereas fascism was, it's a new world order. It will wipe out a lot of people on the way, but it wouldn't end all of humanity. I mean, I think philosophically it does depend on that. It's self-devouring, but I could see them stretching that out for a long time. But atomic war is atomic war. Boom, we're done.
Yeah,
A
nuclear exchange. A nuclear exchange. The physics of a nuclear exchange are such that certainly, if it didn't wipe out all life, or all human life on the planet, it would send us all back into a new Stone Age. I mean, it would be because of the nature of the weaponry. And the thing is, the guys that were responsible for developing all of it were in the vanguard of saying, okay, hey, look, we got to be real careful about this, And I grew up in a military household.
Okay.
And, with the understanding that mutually assured destruction was inevitable. Not that the destruction was inevitable,
right,
but that the particular kind of Mexican standoff that we had going on with the Soviet Union was not something that historically could have been avoided. And the moment you develop this technology, everybody else is going to want the technology.
Right.
And the moment that happens, you are in an arms race.
Right.
And the only way to maintain stability is in stalemate. In this system where it is
a tense stalemate.
Yes, really. I mean, my dad was living in Miami during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Wow.
Well, wait, hold on. No, Cuban Missile Crisis. He might have been in Florida, but he was, his hometown was Miami.
Okay.
And so wherever he actually was, I'd actually have to ask him because by that time,
but he was still connected.
He was in the Navy, but he was still connected to this town that was right on the end of the match. When everything was.
I like that metaphor better than what I was thinking of.
Yeah, well,
Let's say that Michigan is a hand.
Yeah, well, it's a hooked nose, maybe.
Sure.
It's a nation's zucchini.
I got in trouble with my grandma once with that. she's from Michigan.
Okay.
And she said, when God rested, he put his hand down, and that's why we have Michigan. And I, being 11 and not having a filter yet, believe it or not, I have one now. I said, really? Then how do you explain Florida? So no dessert for me.
Yeah.
So your dad was the tip of the arrow, as it were.
Well, yeah, as it were, and and at the time he was, let's see, Cuban Missile Crisis was 64. 64?
Nah, 61.
61.
No, 62. You're right.
62.
Bay of
Okay.
Pigs was 61.
Okay, so actually he was 44, 62. He was, I'm trying to remember what time of year. He may have actually just graduated high school. So yeah, he just graduated high school. Mm-hmm. He was attending college in Tallahassee at the time. He was still in Florida. So
I think the really sad part about that is that he was attending college in Tallahassee.
Yeah, well, yeah.
So
having heard about Tallahassee, I have to agree with you. But and my mother, talking about the paranoia and the fear that everybody had during that time. My mother was, at the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis, she would have been 17.
Sure.
But as a child growing up in the 50s, she had nightmares about the Reds.
Well, they had bomb drills.
Well, yeah, but specifically, her nightmares were the Reds showing up and torturing her father.
Wow.
And in her dreams, because everybody talked about the Reds, and of course, adults understood that was shorthand for the Soviets,
right?
Who are people,
right?
My mother, as a 6-year-old in the 50s, didn't understand that this was other people. She just heard the Reds, and her subconscious created these monsters that she says nowadays she says that thinking about those dreams, they were oddly kind of camel shaped and not human. They were monsters. The Reds, because there was no human context attached to what she was hearing.
I want to loop into that in just a second. Go ahead and finish your story.
Yeah, well, that's basically it. Is just they're this new military technology, this new ability to destroy everybody on the planet, either instantaneously or over the course of a couple of years with nuclear winter, was all pervasive. My parents grew up on opposite ends of the country.
Okay.
My mother was the daughter of an Okie in California, and my father was in Florida. A much more bourgeois upbringing, and they both carried and still carry. I mean, if you talk to them about stuff, their attitudes about communism, socialism, any of those related sorts of isms, they're all colored by that experience.
Absolutely.
And based on the stuff that Stalin did and the way that was, it's meaningful, It's something that I think we need to keep in mind.
Also based on the things that we were told. I mean, the newsreels. I have DVDs of old newsreels called Mental Hygiene. And there's all kinds of stuff. I mean, there are very few high school history teachers who don't show the duck and cover videos. And the ridiculousness of that. My dad was a child in the 1950s as well. And he remembers the duck and cover drills. And he remembers thinking at the time... And, we tend to remember ourselves as smarter than we were. So I don't know if he actually thought this at the time, but I'll give him credit for it. He remembers at the time thinking, what's the point of ducking and covering if it's an atomic bomb? And so you've got that with the kids. And at the same time, these kids have more access to funds than any generation prior. So after World War II, everyone stops being afraid of large groups of fascists with guns, the Nazis and the Japanese. They'd lost. So superheroes don't need to do their thing anymore. And superheroes dwindled in importance because the threat was a much more generalized threat.
Okay.
And atomic bombs made it so death wouldn't come from a particular front. It would just come from above. And a decision made somewhere else that has no connection to you whatsoever. So death was highly probable and effervescent and always with you. And communism was a threat that no one could really define. Your mom was afraid of the Reds. No idea what that really means. And it was just really menacing and scary. Also, TV was a thing that was starting to come out. People had access to money. Because of the GI Bill and because of a number of things, not the least of which the rest of the world was bleeding to death. So we were selling them all kinds of stuff. The kinds of movies that got really big in the 1950s were monster movies. And you had the monster movie showcase. With the giant ants.
Yeah.
All kinds of atomic, everything gets bigger. but also revisiting old monsters because of that fear of going back to the Stone Age, the Wolfman. And also revisiting the idea of people who are making decisions about our lives that we have no control over, Dracula. And you start to have all of these monster genres really popping up in a big way in the 1950s. And it helps us tap into our anxieties as a culture and release them a little bit. And kids could now take a nickel down, well, it's probably a dime, but take a dime down to the movie house on the weekend. And
I don't know, by the 50s it might have been a quarter. That'd be something.
It could have been, but
yeah.
Either way, they can go down there. They have disposable income.
They have, yeah.
And, that way mom finally gets a rest. Dad can have a nooner with his secretary or whatever. And
Dad would have been, in that time period, Dad would have been, doing whatever he wanted to do in the middle of the day anyway, because it's not like he was expected to stay home and look after the kids.
That's also really good. He was probably down at the lodge.
He was down at the lodge or the VFW.
Yes.
Because we're talking about the 50s, and
that's true.
Everybody was in the VFW because everybody had been drafted.
Yeah, that's true.
But
monster movies are huge. And so kids get to go away for a couple hours, tap into that anxiety, and release that tension just a little bit. And since TV and movies were somewhat limited in the sex that they could depict and the horror that they could depict, because you watch them, they're very, very vanilla. Because of the Hays Code.
By our standards, because of Hays.
The Hays Code,
which is
comics were a place that were not regulated, and they were cheap. But there is a problem that I'm going to get to in a minute. So I skip ahead to 1954. I know that you've got some stuff that you wanted to address through the 50s as well.
Going back to talking about the Reds, going back to talking about this ever-present kind of threat.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that we see during this time period over and over again is the insecurity that people have. There's this, like we talk about, the everybody's going to die in a fusion or fission blast. But there's also, at the same time, because safety is so tenuous, because we're balancing on a knife edge, and we know that if we get the advantage in the arms race, if we find the secret bullet, we're not going to use it first.
Right.
But if they get the edge, or they figure out how to overcome us, they are going to use it first, because they're them, we're us. That's the way.
That's why we have to keep at it.
That's why we have to keep at it, and thus you have the missile gap, the whole controversy about the missile gap. That's the reason you have the amount of hysteria.
That's a good word for it.
That was tied in with Alger Hiss.
Yes.
And the Rosenbergs, and.
Actual spies.
It's understandable. Yeah, actually, honest to God, working for a foreign power, not unlike people in our current government today. But the Rosenbergs, we now know they really were actually spying. Alger Hiss, in Britain it was Kim Philby, who didn't get caught until a long time later.
Well, and the worst thing for that hysteria is to actually find proof that you were right. Because
even when you're paranoid, even if you are paranoid, doesn't mean they're not out to get you.
Right.
And the moment you find even the smallest iota of evidence that it was genuine, then
you have the anecdote.
All of it is justified. All of it is totally justified.
And needs to be ramped up.
And for God's sakes, we need to do more to stop it. So even before McCarthy, there was McCarthyism.
Yep.
McCarthy
learned.
Yeah. From other people. But in 47, was the first reference to the House, people in the House talking about communist fellow travelers within government.
Do you remember, by the way, what man who later became president was in on one of those committee meetings?
Oh, Nixon.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Nixon was up to his neck in it. I also want to point out that Bobby Kennedy was involved. Everybody on the other side. Yeah. Everybody was tight.
Well, you're absolutely right, though. Bobby Kennedy, future Attorney General
of the United States,
guy in charge of the FBI.
Yeah. Well, and when we start talking about McCarthy, I want to get talking about the Kennedys, Bobby and Jack, and him momentarily, because I think it's worth repeating. So there's this terrible, terrible fear of the enemy within. right? And so the enemy within is Alger Hiss. It's the Rosenbergs. It's Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Yes.
In popular culture, that's the metaphor there is an anvil being dropped on you. That's not the only thing people were afraid of in that same vein, though. You talk about teenagers. You talk about kids suddenly having all this free time on their hands. You talk about them suddenly
and access to
having access to funds and being outside of the home,
the parlor.
They're out doing stuff. They have
each other.
Cars for the first time. They have each other for the first time. And popular culture all of a sudden undergoes this seismic shift.
And they're also valued for the first time.
Well, yeah.
I mean, they're really... the amount of households that have 3 children tripled. The amount of households in the 50s that had 4 children quadrupled. Easy to remember.
Yeah.
But the amount of value placed on the children. These baby boomers were raised with the idea that they were valuable, which was not true of their parents. It was not true of any generation prior to them, that they were valuable members. They were future
kids.
labor, and they were kids, and they were urchins, and we'll build you a playground so you shut up, but it's all going to be on concrete. Hope you don't die. So you have all of that. That seismic shift is coupled with the idea that these children are actually worth valuing.
Yeah. The thing is, there's this weird ambivalence because on the one hand, they're worth valuing for the first time, and oh my God, there are hordes of them. The baby boomer throng.
The amount of leather biker movies that came out of young teenagers. You're absolutely right.
Okay. They're scary. Now, you and I will agree, because we work with teenagers.
They're very scary.
They're terrifying.
Yeah.
I mean, on a one-to-one look punk kid, kind of level, they're not. But as the Reds...
Yeah.
contemplated as, the Reds.
If they ever recognized how much power they could have by organizing.
Yeah, then, man, like anybody. If anybody realized, and so they're spending more time out of the house.
Yep.
They have money. Interestingly, this is the first generation that has access to cars almost as a matter of course.
True.
Once they become teenagers, because everybody now, with the prosperity that the U.S. was going through at the time, and what's good for Detroit is good for America. Yeah. Chrysler, GM, Ford. Cars became a part of being a middle class household.
Thank you for mentioning class, because I was going to say, we say everybody, and what we're talking about is the dominant culture at the time. Yeah. The dominant culture at the time is white middle class America. Yes. Because there are so many other groups that were kept away from this. Yes. In so many ways.
Granted.
So
good point.
It's one of those things we just need to
that's
remember.
Admittedly, as a middle class white kid. Yeah, that's okay. Blind spot. Yeah. You're right. But for the majority culture, for the dominant culture at the time, this was the norm, and this was a new norm. Yes. This was not the way, like the silence, that was not the way they'd grown up. And they wanted, at the same time, they wanted to give their kids this experience of not having to immediately, start working in the family shop right after school all the time. They wanted their kids to have things they didn't have, but at the same time, their kids don't have judgment. What are they going to do with all this time? And so there was this panic about juvenile delinquency. There was this panic about kids going out, young men particularly. And it's interesting to note that at this time, talking about what you say about people being kept out of the dominant culture, you don't see, in the depictions of juvenile delinquency, you don't see African American or Hispanic kids. You don't see Asian kids being portrayed as the leather jacket wearing, toothpick in their mouth. Greasers, greaser culture was white kids. Yep. In Great Britain, Teddy culture, Soch culture. All these subgroups. These were working class, but white.
Right. You're very right.
And for inclusion of minority groups, you have to go into later youth movements in Europe, and I mean today you don't hear about black preppies. You don't hear much about. I mean, you're starting to hear. Thankfully, we're starting to hear more about black nerds.
Right.
Because they're here and welcome.
Just as nerdy
as the rest of us. But in the media that was being created at the time, these were all kids from the dominant culture gone bad. And there was this terrible fear that, while you're not looking,
right,
your kid could be out, doing horrible stuff.
Well, interestingly, you start to see that mixture coming in with music.
Yeah.
With rock and roll music specifically.
Yes.
Which itself is incredibly integrationalist. And then you see white middle class society just go ape shit about it. Like they come off the rails being afraid of what's going to happen when black and white kids dance together.
Yeah.
With music that is blending white country with black rhythm and blues. Like that's an enormous shot across the bow to the dominant culture. And
rockabilly was terrifying.
Yeah, it was just insane. All right, so we are getting toward this idea of juvenile delinquency. We're getting toward this idea of we need to be afraid of the children, and we need to be afraid for the children. Which is interesting to me because it kind of taps into this Freudian aspect, which ties back to Latin grammar, is that fear and desire are intrinsically linked. They're two sides of the same coin. I'm afraid that the werewolf will eat me is the same thing as saying, I hope that the werewolf does not eat me. The thing that you are afraid of is the thing that you hope doesn't happen. The thing that you hope for is the thing that you're afraid of won't happen. So what better way to tie in fear and desire than in these horror comics? Which encapsulate both the fear of the savagery, the fear of the horror, with the sexuality.
The fear of the axe-wielding lunatic combined with the lurid sensuality of the woman being depicted as his victim.
Indeed. So
pick a very trenchant, specific example.
And she's always a redhead. That always bothered me.
Was she?
Very often because
the cover I'm specifically thinking of was a blonde. But I'd have to,
because I'm just thinking four-color comics.
There's a story from the hearings that I want to talk about.
Cool, and we're going to get to that in our next episode. Because we've made this a two-parter.
Digressed,
which is fine. I'm having a lot of fun with it, but this definitely needs to be a two-parter. So this has been the first episode dealing with the CCA. We haven't even gotten to the CCA, but we've laid all the groundwork for it, and I hope that you tune in next time for episode 2.
So here we are at the midway point in our discussion of the CCA and its development. Damian, what do you think is your big takeaway so far?
So far, I've noticed even though I brought up the fear and the horror movies and stuff like that, I didn't realize how pervasive the hysteria was. And I think that word you use, hysteria, was a really apt term throughout the entire American culture at the time. And honestly, like looking at how you and I were raised, the shadow of the Cold War that we were raised in, by people who grew up with that fear, that's going to have an impact on how we're raised and what we hope for. And so just seeing those points connecting was quite something. How about you?
I think the research that you did on the history of the development of the medium of comics prior to the CCA and tying into what the movements were in society with the stuff that was going on was a new window for me, because I knew a little bit about what comics were like before the CCA, but understanding the details of that history is definitely an eye-opener for me. I like it. Since I don't have anything to plug, but I do want to fix my error from earlier. Honor in the Dust, Theodore Roosevelt, War in the Philippines, and the Rise and Fall of America's Imperial Dream is by Greg Jones, and it is a truly compelling work of history. I highly recommend it. I could go on for a long time, but what do you got going?
I look forward to reading a few more good books, including one called Star Wars and the History of Transmedia Storytelling. Yeah, that's the look that I had on my face, too.
Okay.
For those of you who don't have a television for this podcast, I got the Big Bug Eyes by Ed, so it was good. Very, very akin to Janine from Ghostbusters at that one moment. But other than that, yeah, that's kind of all the pluggables that I've got going on. So yeah, that's about it. I hope that you all enjoyed this episode. For Ed Blaylock, I'm Damian Harmony, and this has been A Geek History of Time.